Good morning and welcome. You know, I learned last week that the word welcome is a very old word and it originally meant desired guests. So, all within the sound of my voice, know yourself to be a desired guest this morning. It is well that you come. Welcome. And a special welcome to our guest minister, Reverend Roger Butts. I'm sure I speak for all of us to say it's been such a pleasure to have guest ministers. There's no two alike, and I just love to hear what's on their heart and learn from them all. So, Reverend Roger, you are a welcome guest, a desired guest. So, Reverend Roger has been ordained in the UU tradition since 2002. He's served congregations in Colorado and Iowa. He's been a longtime member of the UU Christian Fellowship and International Thomas Merton Society. His wife is associate minister at Plymouth Congregational Church in Fort Collins. So 2 ministers in the family.
4 children.
Yes. Are they all rebels?
Let's not talk about it.
And presently, he is a chaplain at Pathways Hospice. So that's got to be a big job. Thank you for being here today. I also want to extend a warm welcome to our visitors, whoever you are, wherever you are on your spiritual journey. We are glad that you are here with us today for this hour of worship. And if you want to receive our communications, just sign up on the back table. Now, announcements. Next week, April 14th, Reverend Dana, Debbie Gentry, and Brian Marvel are celebrating our interdependence with a service called We Are Many, We Are One. We live in a world that celebrates the success of the individual as a winner and as being more worthy than others. We can see how that perspective contributes to an imbalance of wealth and worthiness in the lives of countless people. As UUs, we see and value the interconnected web of life. Our theme this month is the gift of interdependence. Perhaps this is where our theology begins. And for announcements, this week we have our lunch bunch meeting at noon. There's a board forum that everyone's invited to on our interim ministry. What's happening? How's it going? That's at 11:30. Mindfulness meditation tomorrow night on Zoom. Reconnecting to Nature, 9 a.m. on Tuesday. Addiction and Recovery, 6:30 Wednesday. Social Sisterhood at noon. Choir rehearsal, 6:30 on Thursday. And a wonderful workshop put on by Reverend Dana and Doug Stewart this Saturday from 9 to 3. And it is called Creating Theology Together. If you have a personal joy or sorrow that you don't want to come speak in the mic, you can just write it on a slip of paper and put that in the offering when it comes around. Many thanks to everyone today involved in today's service, and we have an announcement by Dick with his stewardship.
We're talking about climbing Long's Peak. That's what I'm going to talk about. And I'd like to first off just say good morning and thank you for getting here today. You survived the gale winds of last night. Don't think there was any damage done, but it was pretty brutal. Today we will talk about spiritual practices. Actually, Roger will talk about spiritual practices. But I also have little to elaborate on one of the spiritual practices, which is financial support, one of our favorite spiritual practices. I thank Clay Benton for keeping our climb together, moving upward last couple weeks. Next week, I will close out the annual pledge drive with specifics. But for now, the good news is that the average pledge has increased over last year. The bad news is that about 1/3 of the people who pledged last year still have not sent in their pledge form. I don't know why we procrastinate so well, but I think it is a UU trait. So remember that submitting your pledge form is your ticket to the climb up Longs Peak. So if you just want to, lay back and sleep instead of doing a real spiritual practice, don't send in your pledge form. But I expect to see pledge forms come in and be inundated them. You can do them virtually over the web, or you can do it with filling out the form. Or if worse comes to worse, give me a call and tell me what it is. But we are presently about 2/3 of the way up our climb, and I'm going to say we're presently about ready to tackle the trough. The trough is a long uphill stone, somewhat narrow. Its danger is that the people above you sometimes will knock rocks down onto you. But we're starting to feel the altitude. Each step is a bit harder, and our lungs are asking for more breaths. But the summit awaits us, and it's within reach. So get your ticket, enjoy the climb, and reach the summit, which itself will be a spiritual practice.
Look at this thing. It's beautiful. Well, mine's been used a lot more. Okay, I'm here. I'm the wandering auctioneer, and I just want to bring last minute things together if I can. For those of you who can't remember what time it is or what day you're supposed to do something, we've come up with this beautiful little schedule of all the things that are going on with the auction here this week and next week. So I've got these over in the social hall. Come get one if you need it. And who invited you? Here, you can have that one. I'm taking this one home.
So Pete, at the auction, are people giving like dinners in their homes to bid on at the auction?
Yep, we've got dinner here, and we've got concerts and all kinds of good stuff.
Wow, that's great. But, shouldn't we have something to eat the night of the auction?
Well, that's not my responsibility.
That's heavy shopping.
Heavy stuff.
It brings an appetite. So, as our tradition is, we'll be doing a potluck, and I have these sign-up sheets that I will pass around to one to each side. And I would like to point out, there's different categories to sign up for. You may not have an idea right now what you want to bring, but if you can get it in a category, that's good. But I would like to bring your attention to the bottom of the second page, asking you to label any allergy information on what you bring, and also consider bringing some of those dietary restriction type things, gluten-free, vegetarian, dairy-free, and market-lessly. So, thank you, and I hope to see all of you. And, I see some faces out there that are new-ish. And I would like to point out to you, the auction is a social event as well as a fundraiser, and it's a great way to get to know this congregation. So, thank you.
Affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its call. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now, if you want to just take a moment to greet each other, and then we'll hear from Reverend Roger.
How are you?
How you doing?
Hey. Hey. Nice to see you.
I'm impressed by that.
Walking
Walking
stick.
stick.
I'm going to talk about it. Hey, nice to see you all. Yeah, I'm going to talk about it in a minute. This is the downside. This is the downside to greeting one another. Come into this sacred space. Come into this sanctuary, made sacred by your participation, made sacred by your presence. Come as you are, valuable beyond measure, perfect, loved. Come as you are becoming, growing in wisdom and spirit. This day is pure gift. Pure gift. This ability to be together, to greet one another, to pass the peace is pure gift. This desire, this longing, this capacity to create something beautiful for 1 hour and 15 minutes. I saw the notes. It said 10 to 11:15. So it is pure gift, this ability to create something beautiful together. May this time for you be precisely what you need. What you seek is seeking you. If it is comfort, may you find comfort. If it is challenge and fuel for that activism, may you find that here. If it's to see in one another communion, in the face of one another, sacred communion, may that be yours today. Whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Friends, welcome one and all. don't know if we have any kids today or not, but this is for the young at heart, for all of us. Can you see my walking stick? I didn't mean to. Oh my goodness, hold on. Come on up. What is your name? Evelyn. My name is Roger. Who is this human with you? Who is this? What's your name? Curtis. Curtis, nice to meet you. Look, do you see my walking stick? My favorite, this is a church, this is a congregation. And sometimes people go to mosque, and sometimes people go to temple, and sometimes people go to church. And my favorite image for a church is a walking stick. What does a walking stick do? What are some of the things that a walking stick helps us with? Stable, balance, support. An emergency. If you're stuck in the snow, have you ever been stuck in the snow or in the mud? Yeah. It's fun to be stuck in the mud. But sometimes we need help getting out of our stuck mudness. And so we plant our walking stick and it helps us. And when we're climbing a hill, it will be right beside us. But you know what the walking stick doesn't do? Walk for you. You've got to walk. So I think it's the perfect image for a congregation. A congregation is here to support you, to provide balance, to accompany you, that's a big word, to walk beside you when you're on an adventure and going, but it won't walk for you. There was a person named Baby Shugs, and she had all these friends, and one day they decided to go out to a clearing, and they went out to the clearing, and she said to the congregation there, "Children, come forward and laugh." And all the children came up and laughed. And they said, "Women, come up and cry for the living and the dead." And they all cried. And men, come forward and dance. And they danced the antelope dance. And then, when it was time to speak, she put down her walking stick. She put down her walking stick. And in the silence that followed, she offered up her great big heart. And what she said to them was, and this is the important part, love your hands, love your eyes, love your elbows, love your knees, love your ankles, love your feet, love your mouth. But most of all, and this is the big prize, love your heart. That's the walking stick. My favorite image for the church. All right, bye, sweetness. Bye. Before we get to our next piece, though, can I tell you one more thing? Can anybody see what's on top of this? So the story that I told about Baby Shugs, I preached on that in 2002 in Davenport, Iowa. Baby Shugs, it's from the novel Beloved by Toni Morrison. And the next week, somebody in that church came to me and gave me this walking stick. And what's on the top of it? Morel. And he said to me, "Roger, this is so you'll always know the morale of the story."
So the definition of spirituality that rings most true to me is one that I heard a long time ago. And that is that spirituality is the depth dimension of life. I'm blown away on a regular basis by how deep and complex reality is. All that we know and all that we don't know. That we exist seems just such a miracle. Just that we exist, that we're here is such a miracle. I can't even wrap my mind around it. Seriously. Somebody said you can either live like nothing is a miracle or live like everything is a miracle. And the older I get, the easier it is to live like everything is a miracle. Take us, for example. Every human is both what you can see and what you can't. If I held up an acorn, you could see the acorn, but you could not see the oak tree that is in it. And that is every bit as much part of the acorn as what you can see, right? Our brains have to make sense of the world, so we label things. We file them neatly away into categories that we know, and we fill in the gaps to make a working picture for ourselves of the world, right? So we can function. But every now and then, I think we all get the feeling that there is so much more out there that we can't grasp. We ourselves are so much more than we can understand. When it comes to my own family, sometimes I can sense the mystery that is the person that I think I know so well. It's like the people I love are glaciers, 20% above water and all the rest submerged. I think that's why they marry people that I'd never choose for them. Seriously, there's so much more to them than I can even understand having raised them. I didn't know there was a name for it at the time, but I used to have existential crises now and again. And the thing that helped me most was what my husband would always say to me. He would say, we only know what we know, and we can't know what we don't know. So how can you be so distraught over something you can't even know? He'd tell me that you can teach a chimpanzee like 300 words if they're very smart, but you are never going to teach a chimpanzee calculus. If you spend every waking moment of your day, you are never going to teach a chimp calculus. And likewise, there are things that humans understand and things that humans are incapable of understanding in this very short lifetime of ours, right? And this was his other thing that I remember him saying a lot. When it rains, fish may be aware that drops are hitting the surface of the pond, right? But fish will never understand the water cycle, let alone the airplane that's flying up in the sky. That is so far out of their realm, so far out of the dimension that they inhabit. It's never going to happen. So I'm better about that now. But we have to humble ourselves and respect the depth dimension of life, which is spirituality. And this is why, in my view, we benefit so much by having a place for spiritual practice, right? We need space and time to honor the big reality that's outside of our understanding, and even the big us. The more that we can tap into that bigger self, the better off we are, right? Usually we go through in our small ego selves with our minds that's making that picture, and we're not aware of our own immensity. So today, let's light our chalice for the adventure and privilege of being alive and being here together to explore spirituality and all that it entails to be human. Oh, and do you know what? I think we go right on to, sorry about that. Let's go on to our offering. Each week, we support the work of this congregation and all the ways we live our values in the world through generosity. Half of our donations go to this church and half to an organization that we choose. And as you know, March and April, our donations support raw tools. Turning guns into garden tools is at the center of their work. Raw Tools gives workshops also on restorative justice, de-escalation, bystander intervention, circle process, open dialogue, and mental health first aid. So all of us could use that, and now is our time to give to this worthy cause.
Can I just tell you a really quick story about Raw Tools? Raw Tools, raw is war backwards, right? And so it's clever. Mike Martin is the director of Raw Tools, and that is his father, Fred, in the striped shirt, and his father, Fred, over on the far right there. In January of 2017, Mike and I are good friends, and in January of 2017, Mike and Fred and I went out to Washington to be with a group called Abolition Action Coalition. It was the 40th anniversary of the reinstatement of the modern death penalty. And we went out there, and Gary Gilmore had been executed 40 years before in Utah. And so in 2017, we went out to Washington, and we went to Church of the Reformation, which is right in the shadow of the Supreme Court on Capitol Hill. And during that evening, people who had been directly impacted by the death penalty spoke. And while they spoke, out on the front yard, Fred Martin and Mike Martin were out taking the rifle, the kind of rifle that was used by the state of Utah when they executed Gary Gilmore, and they were turning that rifle into a garden tool, into garden tools. It was a really powerful experience. But the next morning, we all gathered at the United Methodist Building on Capitol Hill. There were about 100 of us, and we were going to go and protest in front of the Supreme Court and unveil a banner that says end the death penalty now, and that is frowned upon in the Supreme Court. And so 18 of the people gathered were arrested. And the rest of us were praying and singing on the sidewalk. After that protest, Mike and Fred and I went to the National Mall, and we went to the Lincoln Memorial. And this was the most memorable part of that weekend for me. We looked out, and Mike and Fred are Mennonites. And Fred looked at all those marble buildings, all that granite, the National Academy of Sciences and all those buildings that, department, I can't remember all the buildings, but you can just see all this power. And he said simply, almost so quietly that you could barely hear it, he said, how different from Christ's table this is. Christ's table full of the poor and the humble, and all of this power. And he was weeping that we had come so far away from that simple vision of beloved community where the poor and the powerful eat together in a simple table. I'm so glad you're supporting Raw Tools. Keep up the good work.
Well, we all lead separate and complex lives outside of these walls, so it's important that we make space to share with each other what's going on in our lives. If you have a personal joy or sorrow you would like to share, please come forward or raise your hand and I can bring you the microphone. If there's any comments in the offering basket, if you could get those to me, and if you're on Zoom, we'll hear from you as well.
I'm Fran Green, and I have both a joy and a sorrow today. My joy is that I've finally had a chance to meet Reverend Roger because he came to the church remotely and served them since we moved here. So that was the church on the Outer Banks, how you use COB. My sorrow is that on Fridays I have a music lesson on FaceTime with my almost 10-year teacher. And he's had cancer, and I found out Friday he might have just 1 year left to live, if that long. So John Franzen, please hold him in your heart. He's a wonderful teacher.
I have a joy to share because we were at the community kitchen with the Unitarians helping for the homeless. And I was so happy and elated that my step-granddaughter, 14 years old, was there helping. And she's a kid with a lot of issues, I'm telling you, but she did so well. And she says, oh, I like this. I love doing this. So that was so surprising and so joyful. I was so happy. Yeah, thank you.
This is a big joy. Our new member, Scott Walker, raised his hand and he volunteered to be the chair of our auction this year. And yesterday we had the most inspirational, enthusiastic, energetic meeting with old timers and new timers sitting around the table, and Kat and Clay beautifully passed the baton on to Scott. And the whole energy vibe in the room was, so Scott is new and we're here for him and he doesn't have to do it alone. It was just fantastic. So it was totally working and living our values. And I wish you all were in the room, but we'll see you on the 20th.
Hi, it's Mim again, still. Number one, Brenda Christensen is still struggling, and I would be grateful if you would send her some strength and hope and a lot of love. And I could use some myself, because because I'll explain later, but anyway. And I want to say how grateful I am for this community. I'm going through a very difficult time, but I'm getting a lot of help. And so I thank every single one of you. So there.
I have a really good joy. I had volunteer jobs on my schedule. I prefer to do that, so I plan for them every week. I don't do very well with single stuff, some people here know. But I work at a daycare now. In the morning for 4- and 5-year-olds, I read to them. And this little girl came up to me with a t-shirt with 2 kittens on it. I said, oh, it's cute little kittens, what are their names? I didn't hear anything, so I thought maybe she didn't hear me. I said, what are their names? And she looked up quizzically and says, I don't name my shirts. She avoided me for a couple weeks. She talked to me again this week. I think she thinks I'm weird.
Anything on Zoom? Okay. Well, thank you all who voiced your joys and concerns, and also we acknowledge the joys and concerns that remain in our hearts unspoken. And with outer walls, the joys and concerns out there in the world.
Listen. Be quiet. Be still. Be gentle. Relax your jaw. Loosen your shoulders. Listen. Be gentle and still and quiet. Let the silence make sacred the place you're in right now. Look at the light or the table or the sun or the wild wind through the wild trees. They too are a sacred text. Listen. The world does not need your words. Let your mind crawl into your heart space for just a while and let it take a nap. There's nothing to think. There's nothing to know. Let a still quiet gently keep you just for a while. Thomas Merton wrote these words more than 50 years ago. The contemplative has nothing to tell you except to reassure you that if you dare to penetrate your own silence and dare to advance without fear into the solitude of your own heart, and risk the sharing of that solitude with the lonely other who seeks with you and through you, then you will truly recover the light and the capacity to understand what is beyond words and beyond explanation, because it's too close to be explained. It is the intimate union in the depths of your own heart, of God's Spirit and your own inmost self, so that you and God are in all truth one Spirit. I have nothing to say to you, nothing to teach you, no advice, except this one little thing. Dare. Dare to listen. Dare to listen to the silence. Dare to listen to the silence that resides in your heart. That's it. That's it. As a chaplain in the hospital and in hospice for many years now, I've learned that if you can sit with someone and give them your undivided attention and give them the sense that you will not abandon them even when it gets messy, even when it gets ugly, even if they have to run down a few rabbit holes, that you will stick with them come what may. And if you can keep your mouth shut just long enough and avoid all temptations to interject or find the sunny side of the road or rationalize or, God forbid, theologize, if you can avoid the temptation to share a cliche like, it could be worse. No. Or, this is all part of the plan. No. Or, heaven needed another angel. Let's say it together. No. If you can do that and sit there even when the tears get all mucusy and snotty and runny, and sit there and say, do you want to tell me about that? If you can do that, you will hear someone into speech. And that is the best gift you can give someone. And you will hear what is wise, what is sacred, what is holy, what is super important. Like the woman the other day who told me stories about farming with her husband of 61 years, raising kids and dogs and retiring, and how lonely she's been in the 3 years since he died. At the end of telling me these stories, she said simply, for 61 years, we were there for each other. We trusted each other at every turn, and his absence, after so much presence, the words tapered off. And what remained was an unspoken, silent truth about how this love had shaped her, a truth so deep there were no longer words to express it. And in her silence, you could tell that that love, even then, was enveloping her. Even with the physical absence, there was some kind of mystical, enduring love that was holding her, that she could feel in that moment. This woman told a deep truth about what mattered to her and what was lost and what endured. And at the end, a silence fell upon us. For she had expressed the deep truth of her life, that she was lonely and loved at the same time, all at once. Have you ever in your life felt that loneliness and that love all at once, beyond words? All of us have such depth of experience, such depth of grief and loss and life and love, and our heart is the metaphor we use for the container of those stories. I get paid. Someone pays me to listen to such stories and to ask a simple question. How is it with your spirit? How is it with your soul? How is it with your heart? And then I get to practice being quiet and letting the wisdom of another life emerge out of the quiet. I want to challenge you. I want to invite you every day to say to yourself, self, how is it with my soul? Ryan, how is Ryan's heart? Right? I'm telling you, it is easier for me to sit and ask Ryan that question and let Ryan speak than it is for me to say, Roger, how is it with your soul? And listen to my own heart speak its wisdom. Do you know the Quaker Parker Palmer? Yeah. He says the soul is like a wild animal. And if you want to get in touch with that wild animal, the one thing you don't do is run through the woods saying, come out, wherever you are, right? Wild animal is going to flee. But he says if you sit at the base of a tree and sit quietly and keep your eyes open, in that quiet, that wild animal might emerge. So it is with our heart. So it is with our soul. If we can sit silently for just a while, that which we desire will come and give us a glimpse of that wildness we seek. And if you dare to penetrate the silence of your own soul and keep your mouth shut long enough to hear what it has to say, you might hear a response. You might hear, oh, my soul is tired. It is sore, it is run down, it is weak, it is old. And after a while, you might say, that sounds hard. Do you want to tell me about it? Do you want to talk about it? And you shut up some more and listen. Now, I don't want you to go home and tell your friends that the pastor came and visited and told you all to shut up. Like, that's not what I'm doing. It's an invitation to listen deeply. Or maybe you'll hear your soul say, springtime has sprung, the sun is bright, the days are getting longer. I am ready, I am open. And after a while you might say, that sounds amazing, I'm all ears, if you want to say more. Spiritual practices, as you beautifully said, help us to get into that condition of quieting down, centering, grounding ourselves, and listening. It doesn't matter what the spiritual practice is. You can run, you can pray, you can meditate, you can do yoga. You can do yoga in 104-degree heat like my wife does. We don't know why, but she does it. She loves it. You can go to church, you can go to mosque, you can go to temple. You can listen to classical music, you can listen to Steely Dan. You can walk. It is the intentionality and the attention that you bring that enables you to get in touch with your inner world. And from that, one opens the inner doors of one's heart to the infinite silences of the Spirit, out of whose abysses love wells up without fail and gives itself to all. And gives itself to all. That's the universalist side of our tradition coming out, huh? And this is essential. The only thing that will open the door of your heart, and it will help you open that, is if you can be radically hospitable to others in relationship and community and democracy. To help you be radically hospitable to others is to first be radically hospitable to yourself and your heart. Most of us can remember 1992. The Gulf War was beginning, 91, 92, sometime in there. The Gulf War was beginning. And all these progressives and all these anti-war types came and they were protesting the administration. They were protesting the Gulf War. And they gathered and they were agitated and fired up, rightfully so. There were a series of speakers talking to that crowd. And Henry Nouwen, the Catholic priest, the peacemaker, came up to the microphone. And he didn't say, "You're right, they're wrong, they're the bad guys." Right? This crowd was out for blood. They wanted to be right. They wanted the others to be wrong. Right? Henry Nouwen recognized that. And the first thing he said before he said anything else was, "How is it with your soul?" He wanted to bring down the temperature, right? Because in times of agitation, 2024 is going to be an interesting, is that the word? Year, right? In times of agitation, what are we tempted to do? We're tempted to come over here and act out of the house of anxiety, act out of the house of fear, act out of the house of dehumanizing the other. But what is the invitation that our universalist side asks us to do? As we build the beloved community in 2024, as we build the beloved community, to stay grounded and rooted in the house of love. Spiritual practices help us to stay in the house of love. It takes courage. And it takes curiosity. To knock on the door of your heart takes courage. Just like as a chaplain, when I knock on a door, I don't know what I'm going to find on the other side. It could be regret. It could be grief. It could be fear. It could be any number of things. It could be relief. It could be a new life. It could be joy. It takes courage to walk into that door. Same with your heart. And the other thing it takes is curiosity. To be open to that encounter with the other is to stay curious. If I think I know something about somebody because they put on their, intake form that they're Presbyterian and from Illinois and grew up in the 80s, right? If I have a backstory for that person, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know that person, right? Then I'll never truly encounter them. The same with your spirit. The same with your spirit. Keep open so that you can go there and stay curious and non-judgmental and say it's a safe place. You can come out and talk, right? I'll leave you with this. When I lived in Colorado Springs for 14 years before moving up here a year ago. I'm glad to be with the Unitarians and the Universalists up here. And I love your sanctuary, by the way. It's gorgeous. In Colorado Springs, I was a hospital chaplain full-time at a Catholic hospital, Penrose and St. Francis. And one Friday night at 7:30, I got a phone call from a nurse. Roger, there's a little frail old lady, and she's confused and she's alone. Her family has gone to get some food and rest up for the night. And she's going to enter hospice in a couple of days. I think she could use some company. And I said, of course, I'll be right up. So I went up to the 4th floor. And before I walked in, the nurse said to me, Roger, she's in there. She's in and out of sleep, in and out of awareness. But she's sort of whispering the Lord's Prayer. You know, the Our Father? Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You know that one? And sure enough, I walk in, and she's tiny. She is tiny, and she is frail, and she's just muttering this. And I sit and I hold her hand. I'm like, even I know the Lord's Prayer. I'm going to say it with her, right? And so we start. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day. And somehow, as we're talking, she comes to consciousness. She comes to awareness of my presence. And I'm just holding her hand, and she looks at me, and she says, oh dear, I seem to have forgotten the end, but thank you, God, for everything. But thank you, God, for everything. In the silence, she's probably said that 1,000,000 times, right? In her parish and growing up and so on. In the silence and quiet of her own spirit, she looked and she listened and found there gratitude, deep gratitude for all of it, for all of it. May it be so with you and yours and your journey. Thank you. Is that okay? God you seek, may God walk with you. If it's life you embrace, may life return your affection. If it's the right path that you seek, may the way be found and the courage to take it step by step. Go in peace.